Okay, 1, 2, 3. We are starting again, Capture 5, and we are amazing enjoying these vibes of the festival for the future. And I have joining me now for a quick corridor here, amazing guest of me, Sam. Sam, how are you today, and how are you seeing the vibes of the festival so far?
Well, I'm very fine. Thank you very much for having me, and it's just a privilege to be with you today. It's a privilege to be with you today. It's a very interesting conference for me, in that it brings young people from across Aotearoa, brings them in one place, and the melting down of ideas that I've seen here so far gives me hope that the fight against climate change has a future in this country, and that we are creating the awareness and the right level of movement among us young people in this country. So the future, as far as climate change is concerned, looks very bright for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sam. Sam, I will talk more in this corridor of climate, but before that, let me ask you about if you can introduce yourself to our audience and people watching this podcast as well.
Well, thank you very much. I'm originally from Zambia. I've been in New Zealand now for about 3.5 years. I work for Wellington City Council as a principal advisor, climate change adaptation. Yes, I've got about 20 years of experience in the space of climate change. And prior to New Zealand, I was in South Africa for 18 years. And prior to that, I was in my country. And that's basically my movement over the last number of years. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And Sam, I'm really interested in the backgrounds that you have proven pretty much a lot of knowledge in the space. So one of the things we are trying to do with this Voice of Aroha, we are running awareness project around climate actions and targeting especially with our community of refugees and communities. So in your experience, in the climate area, what you can see have been changing and what is happening in Aotearoa, and what can communities play a role to do some kind of actions that we can all be part of this corridor?
No, thank you very much for that question. I think the first thing that has changed from a climate change perspective is that at national level, we now have the right policy systems in place. The legislation is still catching up, but the strategies, the National Adaptation Plan has been done, the Emission Reduction Plan has been done. So there is a national direction in New Zealand, and there is resources being made available. What the challenge now is the doing, the action. And that's where your work is really, really important, because as government departments, I work for local government, we have realized that we can't do this, we can't fight climate change on our own. We need all stakeholders, particularly community stakeholders. And the change that we want to achieve to be able to meet the Paris Agreement targets that have been set starts at the community level. And that's why cities have become important, communities have become important, because at the community level, that's where the rubber hits the tar. And that's where the most impact can be found.
Yeah, that's really right and correct. So I tell you in that aspect of communities playing a role, right? How the city council is having a role to mitigate that kind of cultural background of those communities, and as well also have that opportunity to play a role in this of climate issue, let's call it, and how we can make a balance between what is the cultural habits happening with this community, and as well as to moving toward actions to reduce our emissions.
Yeah. Now, let me start by admitting on one thing that I need to admit, and that is we are playing catch-up in as far as our cultural sensitivity work is concerned in most of the municipalities in this country. But having said that, there is movement, and what we are learning, for instance, in my area of work in the climate change adaptation space, we've started doing social vulnerability assessments, where we have realized that while everyone else is vulnerable, there are more vulnerable communities than others. And we have come to realize that some of those most vulnerable communities are indigenous groups, the Maoris, the Pacifica, but also the immigrant communities. And because of their usually very difficult socio-economic conditions, they are very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So in our planning for adaptation interventions, we are beginning to become more cultural sensitive. But as I said earlier, we are still young in this space. So our appeal to communities out there, especially the cultural diverse communities, is you hold the answers to most of the questions that you are asking the councils. Come partner with us. We might ask the right questions and you might give us the right advice that might actually end us finding the solutions that we need. So we need to work together. We need to co-produce the solutions to the questions and the problems that we have.
Yes, that's right. And that's amazing pathways to work together. And that's the thing. We community need each others. And the other things, so I want to ask you about if there's any policies or there's any support for ethnic communities background, which is refugee and migrants, that to access that kind of to these conversations, but it's not really, maybe it could be different plan of what council have. Do you think that's a way the council or any other agencies to collaborate on a way that first wait what is the needs of this community and how we can bring them into korero? Will be that flexibility on accessing that kind of pathway?
I'll tell you what, and I'll speak very candidly on this point. I'm barely 2 weeks into my role here. But from my previous experience, there are usually a lot of community development departments that are working in these councils that are running ethnic group interaction and partnership programs. And what we have done, for instance, in Taronga in my previous role, was to work closely with the ethnic desk in that department and begin to carry out surveys and begin to carry out assessments of what the particular needs are of those communities. And I can tell you it's amazing the type of knowledge that and insight that we developed from such. And I want to believe it's a similar situation here in Wellington. It can be done and it will be done because there's some really nice work that is going to be coming up now in the Wellington space around climate change adaptation.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, korero. And I really appreciate this, korero, and the amazing job, Mahi, you are doing, and the knowledge you bring with you. I appreciate that. Sam, so what's your advice for our young people?
Well, look, my advice to young people out there is take your space. If you wait to be given the space, it will never be given. And remember that this is your future that we are talking about here. It's your future that is at stake. Most of the older generations are not going to be there in the next 20, 30 years. So take your space, ask the right questions, knock on the right doors, make noise where you can. But in all of it, let it be constructively in a way that you can actually make the change that we need out there. Our future as a people and as a nation is in your hands.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you
a
so much.
privilege to have you here. Thank you
So much, brother.
Thank